Hey everybody, I am so glad that you're here. I hope that you enjoyed our very short talk about plot last week and got to check out the blog to see what else I had to say about that. This week, we're going to tackle a little bit bigger of a topic. We're going to talk about editing this week. So let's dive in and talk about editing your pantsed novel. When you edit a pantsed novel, it is a lot of work. This is where the majority of the draggy, boring, discouraging work of writing is going to come in. Now, because if you're anything like me and the way that you pants, I just sit down and I start writing, and whatever comes into my brain is what goes on the page. I don't worry too much about editing, about flow, any of that as I'm getting my first draft on the page. So when I go back and start at the beginning, I've developed a lot of the things as we go. So for example, in my fantasy novel that I'm working on, when I started it, I didn't really know how the magic system worked. I didn't have a good idea of the political structure, of the societal structure, of the various races I was going to have. This is all stuff that I did not know when I started. But as I get closer and closer and closer to the end of my book, I'm really starting to figure out how some of this stuff works, or at least I'm getting a good foundation so that when I go back to edit, I can take the time to really start developing those ideas and those concepts. Like that's where the really hard work comes in with pantsing your novel is in this editing process. So I'm going to break it down into a few steps that I use, and you can take what works for you, leave what doesn't, figure out your own process, but this is what works for me. So the first thing that I do when I edit is I go one section at a time, like one chapter, but because my fantasy isn't in chapters yet, it's just one big document, I've broken it up into kind of headlined sections so that when I need to go back and look for a detail that I know I talked about, but I just can't remember, I can go back to the section that I'm pretty sure it's in, skim through it, find it. So anyway, one section at a time, and I'll start reading it. And I'll just read it all the way through so that I really get a good idea of what is in that section. And then I figure out what is missing from what I have later in the book. So if I talk about magic, that's when I start figuring out really in depth how the magic system works. And I know my characters better as well. So then I can start adding in some more just more in-depth character introduction, character development, all of that. I really have a good understanding of who they are, and so I can adjust their behaviors or whatever based on that. I've also decided whether I'm going to use different words for things. I can go back and I can change out those words for something else. I know that right now I am not going with traditional human foods for my main character, but they're the same kinds of things. So, they have something that's kind of like a sweet potato, but I'm going to come up with a different word for it. So I will need to go back and I'll need to add in those kinds of things. So there's just a lot of that really, really detail-y kind of stuff that I need to eventually put in. So when I first read through, I kind of look at all these glaring spots that are different, and then I'll go section by section, and I'll do that. Then my next run through is probably where I will actually recruit my official alpha readers. I have a couple people reading it right now as I speak, just because I write better when I know that somebody is reading it or they're going to be catching up to me. So it's like a little competition inside of me. So I wouldn't even call them alpha readers yet, but they're, I don't know, they're kind of, I suppose technically they would be alphas. But I'll have another set of alpha readers where I will just send the whole document and they will read it beginning to end and then answer some very specific questions that I have for them. I'm not going to want a lot of really general feedback, but I'm going to want to know their impressions of some certain things. Once I have that back, then I'll do another editing run through. And this is probably where I'll officially break it into chapters, I think. Because I haven't actually gotten to this point yet, obviously, in my novel. But this third editing run, or the second editing run, is really where I'm going to start adding in a lot of those details that makes my world and my story very vibrant and come alive, because I've already decided on some general things, like the moon is red instead of white like our moon. Tree bark, trees are different colors based on, I don't know yet. I don't know why they're different colors, but I'll come up with something. So we have red trees, we have blue trees, we have green trees, different colors of trees. And I'll really start to work on the inner workings of why that is. And, so you see how editing when you pants is so much different than if you were to sit down before you started writing and figure out all this stuff. Because I haven't figured out how the magic system works yet. I haven't figured out why the trees are different colors. I haven't figured out, what are the major bugs or the major animals of the book. Like, I haven't figured any of that out, of this world, I haven't figured all that stuff out yet. But it's these little details that are going to make the book so much more vibrant and interesting. So in these later editing runs is where I'm really going to start diving into what the world is and do a lot of that world building. Or maybe I'll do that while my alphas are reading. I haven't really decided quite the process that I'm specifically going to use, but I do know, based on the literary novel I've already written and edited, and the Bible study that I've already written and edited, that it's going to take multiple editing runs to get through this process. So once I've done the second editing run and it's really starting to become a full, vibrant world, and the story is really complete. I don't have any plot holes now. I figured out how all of the characters fit in the different parts of the stories. I have backstories on all of them. I understand why they make the appearance that they do, when they do, and how they do it. All of this stuff I've already figured out. So once I have that editing run done, that is when I'll start looking for beta readers. And I'm going to have a whole nother video on finding and using beta readers based on what I've learned from getting beta readers for my Bible study and getting beta readers for my literary novel. I have learned so much in the last few weeks and months, about this process, and it's really changing how I view the editing process. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that, but this is a video about editing and not beta readers, so I'm not going to go into that right now. But that's what my editing process looks like. It's just a lot of different stages of editing, of slowly building up the book, and and then finding where it's still lacking, and then adding in where it's lacking, going through it again, finding where it's lacking. You know what I mean? And you could, of course, do this till the end of time. But I definitely plan on following this process fairly closely, with an editing run, a reading run, an editing run, a reading run. Because other people whose eyes are fresher, they're going to be able to see things that I'm not going to see. And so if I can get them to see these things, it makes my job a whole lot easier, because I'm not depending on just me to look at this stuff. And then once I am all done editing, I plan on finding a publisher. Yeah. So we'll come back to that whole process when that starts. I mean, I'm nowhere near getting published right now, but I at least have a novel that I'm working on, and I have a plan of editing, and I know it's going to be a ton of work. It is just so much work editing a pants novel. But in the end, if you're willing to put that work in, it's totally worth it. And I have a novel in my back pocket that I can unequivocally say the editing process is totally worth all the work that it is. So thank you so much for hanging out with me as I talk about this editing process. A little too long. I wanted this video to be shorter, but that's how it goes sometimes. Let me know if you have any thoughts, questions, comments. Of course, you can leave a comment down below in the comments. You can find me around the social sphere. I'm around, so you can find me at my website, carriejellick.com, where I have a blog. I'll talk more about editing tomorrow on there, and we can just keep this conversation going. So good luck with the book that you're writing, if you're writing a book. I'd love to hear about it, and I will talk to you later.